For the better part of a decade, Kate Winslet has wanted to point the lens at World War II photojournalist Lee Miller. The Vogue cover girl turned war correspondent was a pioneer, battling to bring the images from the front to the readers of Vogue. But to get Lee Miller's story in cinemas, Kate faced a few battles herself. But with the film finally made, she travelled here to Australia to tell us all about it.
Not everyone can believe this. Surely they can see what he is.
The question is, what are you going to do, Lee Miller?
Kate, lovely to see you, and congratulations. I was part of that standing ovation at the Corona Orpheum last night. We leapt to our feet.
It was so overwhelming, honestly. I was really, genuinely very, very moved because, you know, audiences can be a really tough crowd, and to get that kind of a welcome was really special.
Well, the other thing that I noticed being in that audience last night was you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was so quiet, particularly in those moments where Lee Miller, who you play, was going into the just liberated concentration camp of Dachau. That dawned on us just how incredible she was to be able to take those pictures.
Well, that's really special to hear, I have to say, because when you think about war correspondents, photojournalists, even today, some of the images that we see, we only get to see because of their courage. We really try to authentically recreate every single one of Lee Miller's images that she truly took, and it was up to us to invent the narrative around how she came to be in every single one of those situations. So, for example, on discovering the train carriages just outside of the Dachau concentration camp, Lee Miller didn't stand outside those train carriages and photograph what she could see. She climbed up into the carriages, stood amongst the death and destruction, and photographed the faces of the unknowing young soldiers looking in, the horror on their faces at what they were seeing.
I just want to do my part. I'm with Vogue magazine.
There's no women allowed in the press briefing.
You've got to be kidding me.
We don't send women to combat.
Well, that's a problem, because I'm here.
I was disappointed in myself that I didn't already know about all of the things that Lee Miller had done and achieved, and I'm so grateful that I now do.
We really made the film for people who don't know who Lee Miller is, have never heard of her at all. So many people have never, ever heard of her. And online, back in 2015, when I first started putting the project together, if I were to Google her, it would say ex-lover of Man Ray, former cover girl. These sort of infantilizing terms, you know, she was viewed so much through the male gaze, and it drove me crazy. Why do we do this thing of sort of using a woman's love life and attaching it to her, these weird labels that were stuck on Lee? And she was so much more than that. She was a model for a sliver of her life in her 20s, hated being a model, and came out from being in front of the camera and took control of her own images. And that, to me, was an amazing thing that she did at a time when not many women were doing it at all.
Bad things do happen to some of us girls.
You're also a producer of this film.
Yeah.
And when I look at the typical Hollywood fare, for instance, if I look at the 2020 Best Film nominees, we've got 1917, Ford versus Ferrari, Joker, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, The Irishman, all about men. And to find a film about women, it literally had to be a remake of Little Women so that we knew there'd be some women in it. And that's the Best Picture nominees for 2020. So if that's an indicator of the proportion of films that are made about a female protagonist versus a male, I imagine it was tough to get this made.
It's hard to make films as a woman, and it's hard to make films about women, that's for sure. Gradually it is changing in terms of how much we're craving female-driven stories now. I think that since the Me Too movement, we are actually hearing what women have to say in a completely different way, and that's very, very valid. And I think the Me Too movement, it really was and is a movement. You know, there's a sense of forward motion in some way. But, you know, if we don't do it, then who's going to? And if we don't do it, it won't change.
Did you have a couple of no's that are of the ilk that I'd imagine, where a male executive didn't get it?
Oh, yeah. I had a couple of those. Yeah, I had one guy say to me, so tell me, why should I like this woman? That was a fun one. And then I had another a director say to me, was trying to get me to do a film that I actually didn't think I was going to be right for. And he said, I tell you what, if you do my film, I'll help you get your little Lee Miller film made.
Your little Lee Miller film.
It's extraordinary the words that sort of spring to mind, isn't it? That you just kind of want to say to somebody like that. But you hold your tongue, you hold your grace, and you move on. And that's what we did.
Even when I wanted to look away, I knew I couldn't.
There are different kinds of wounds. Not just the ones you can see.
Yeah, she said this is the role she's played of which she's most proud. And, you know, she loves Titanic, the one that we all remember her for. And she says she's grateful for that because that movie and everybody's love and passion for it has given her the opportunity to make films like this, and hopefully for people to come and see them and just learn about, you know, this was a troubled woman. Lee Miller, you know, had demons, as you can imagine from some of the things she saw. And yet it is an incredible film of a genuine, well-rounded person who achieved something incredible.
A really great interview, and
Oh,
I
thank
could have
you.
listened to it for half an hour, actually.
You're very kind. Don't tell the producers that, they'll get scared. Lee opens in cinemas this Thursday.